Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 6. I can't believe we've already made it this far, you guys. I appreciate you all for making it with me and, well, this far into the series. I mean, I can't believe I started this 6 weeks ago. I'm really glad you guys are enjoying it so far, but unfortunately it seems not a whole lot of you enjoyed the crawler debunked episode last week. But you know what, that's okay. That's just why you test different stories out and try different things, but as you can all tell, I'm feeling a little more alive this week, so I will be able to pump out more good content for y'all. Now, due to the Halloween season and it being fall, I thought it would be a little more appropriate to cover things more on the paranormal and demonic, so I'll try and focus on that more. Today, though, we're going to be looking at a video I did a little while ago, I'd say about 2 weeks ago, 6 true Dogman and Skinwalker encounters. Now, if you've listened to this show before, you'll know that what to expect is, I basically go through each story, and depending on the details written, I depict whether or not it's true or fake, and you kind of get my commentary and take on it. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first story because I know you guys are just waiting so patiently for it. Here we go. These events are true and will be long. I had my first encounter with a cryptid creature a few years back. I was walking the lane at night when I realized how quiet everything was. I became unsettled and started to feel watched. The moon was bright enough to light up the entire field where I live. I looked behind me and to my horror saw a pale, gaunt, and almost corpse-like humanoid creature crawling up from the field on all fours. It looked just like a Wendigo, portrayed in Until Dawn. There was no way it didn't see me, but it kept to itself. Its eyes were black, but gave a dead, piercing white glow. Alright, so far, we got this creature sneaking up on this guy. It's pale white and kind of humanoid looking with black eyes. So, already it doesn't really sound like a Skinwalker or a Dogman clearly yet. It actually kind of reminds me more of a rake or a crawler in this case. But let's keep listening on. It had long claws and moved in a smooth yet jerky motion. After that encounter, my grandma and I would be here talking seemingly in the house whenever one of us was alone, and in my case, I would feel as though someone or something was nearby. My second encounter was several months back in early to mid-spring, when I had rebelliously tried to walk home one night in an attempt to show how tough I thought I was. I got to the elementary school and noticed everything was quiet, and I started to feel a presence. I decided to walk the more straightforward path I thought would be faster on the main road. While walking, I caught movement at the edge of my vision. This night was particularly dark, and I have slightly above average night vision. Nothing too out there, but I can make out shapes and motion better than most. Anyway, I see a tall, bipedal black creature with coyote-like features dart between trees randomly and very unnaturally quick. It appeared emaciated and had fur patches on its body which looked coarse. I'm sure it knew I was there as it had come from behind me to my right. Okay, so now we've moved on to his second encounter, and this creature that he's describing sounds exactly like that of a Skinwalker. Everybody was mentioning in one of my other past encounters debunked that having a tail is a pretty big deal. I'm not too familiar with that aspect of Skinwalkers, but I just know the whole coyote, looking emaciated, looking rotten, looking gross, disgusting. It seems to be kind of a common trait. And it's really interesting he mentions kind of like that same quality. But the first creature he talked about, I don't know too much about Wendigos either as far as appearance goes, but my guess would that he possibly saw a crawler or maybe a Skinwalker. I know I've heard of Skinwalkers taking other shapes, but again, guys, it's not a subject I am super familiar on. I feel like my specialty lies with Dogman and Bigfoot more than it does some of the more abstract and unconventional cryptids, the crawler being one of them, even though Skinwalkers and Wendigos aren't necessarily abstract anymore because they're getting, there's just more and more sightings happening like every day. And the more and more you look around, you're just starting to see more and more encounters, people talking about Skinwalker. I always used to think the Wendigo and Skinwalkers were kind of the same thing, but the more and more I've been reading about encounters of these things, that they're vastly different. I guess I'm saying that a lot of Wendigos are actually on the East Coast. Again, I'm not too familiar with that, but that's just been kind of like the gist I'm getting. But anyway, back to the story. It sounds like he saw a Skinwalker on this part, and so far seems to be pretty true with just the way the details in the story are given to us and how things are put together. So let's listen on. I fast walked to the nearest streetlight and called to be picked up. I'm very sure I encountered a mysterious creature. Since these encounters, we have had weirdly ghostly chatter beings and photos and strange creature sightings more frequently in the area, from multiple types of monsters. My friend, who I consider my brother, is capable of feeling and identifying these creatures spiritually. He has pointed out 2 potential creatures and 1 possible Wendigo, as felt other beings as well. On some nights, something puts its presence in the air, and we both freak out and bar ourselves in my wife and I's room. I hope you enjoyed these true encounters. Thank you sincerely for listening. Okay, so we've reached the end of the first story, and see, like right there at the end, he tells about having more cryptids and stuff in the area, and how there's some sort of dark presence, dark energy, something drawing these things in. So he also mentioned the Wendigo. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the creature in the first story is a Wendigo. Maybe one of you Wendigo experts can, talk to us all about it in the comment section and tell us more about white, pale humanoids with black eyes and sharp claws. So I don't think the crawler, from what I remember, has those features exactly. But then again, I can't quite remember what Wendigos look like off the top of my head. But anyway, yeah, so we can definitely look at the story and see that there's definitely some sort of common energy that binds these creatures together. So I don't know if it's demonic. I'm not sure if it's supernatural or what, but there are obviously multiple of these cryptids are popping up in the same area. So I don't know if that has any correlation to each other, that maybe they coexist in this area. I'm not sure. But my take on it is the way the details were given and how he talked about it. It doesn't sound fiction to me, and it doesn't sound made up. There's really no details that stand out as false. So I'm going to go ahead and give this story my stamp of approval, and I believe it's true. Looking back, I also chose this story to read to you guys because I like the dynamic of having not only a skinwalker, but I usually like stories where they, it's like multiple stories in one. And I'm sure people who listen to my channel regularly will hear that in episodes where, even though I may say there's like 5 encounters, well, maybe one of those stories is, like an elaboration, or a collab of like 3 to 4 encounters that individual talks about that kind of makes up one story. Such is the case with this one story. Even though it's considered one story, there's 2 encounters in the story. But yeah, as I was saying, I like stories where it has multiple encounters, and specifically, in this case, by 2 different creatures. Again, that first one could have been a Wendigo. It might be a crawler, I'm not sure, but I think it gives more of a dynamic to the listener. So yeah, again, I call the story true, and let's go on to the next one. Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm not going to name the other people I was with due to privacy, so I will be calling them Ted and Alex. Also, I am from New Jersey, and this encounter happened to us in a park in between Central Jersey and North Jersey. I am also of Native American descent, and I'm pretty sure that a few nights ago, my friends and I encountered something which I believed to be a skinwalker. A few nights ago, my friends and I were just hanging around, driving, when one of them suggested we should go to the park and watch the sunset over the lake. We got to the park at around 7:15, and we ended up making our way to the trail, which led to the lake. My friend Ted ended up talking about cryptids and other stuff, and said we might encounter something at the park, as we were on native land, of course. My friend Ted then indicated that there was something ahead of us, and us calling his bluff laughed at him. He then brought up a video of sound effects of the goat man trying to scare us. My other friend Alex said it sounded like a skinwalker. And as you know, when you're on native land, you can't say that name out loud. Just to clarify, there was no one on the path except my friends and I. 2 minutes after he said that name, I looked behind us and we saw we were being followed by something. It was tall, skinny, and moving very slow towards us. I said under my breath, "Oh shit," and my friends turned around and saw whatever I was looking at. I said to them that we should pick up the pace a bit, as it seemed a little weird that this thing came out of nowhere. We saw no indication of anything, no footsteps or rustling in the woods, and my friend said to me, once this thing appeared, they smelled something putrid, which in Native American lore, if you smell something putrid or disgusting, that's a sign of a skinwalker on your trail. Okay, so already a really fun story just to dive right into. So there's several things I want to tackle here. The first, it being happening in New Jersey. See, all the skinwalker stuff I know of is all, in the southwest part of the United States, like on Navajo land and just that general area of Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, kind of the deserty part of the country. So to have it happen on the East Coast, especially in a place that's pretty opposite, it's more temperate and wet and a lot more green than the southwestern part, is a little more interesting. It's not so much that climate has more to do with it. It's just more so the area. I know there's native land that spans all across the country, and I guess it would be foolish of me to believe that skinwalkers can only pertain to one area and to one nation of natives, especially considering that I believe skinwalkers in general are just individuals who have given themselves over to black magic and evil and have made a sacrifice in order to obtain that demonic power. Again, it would be foolish of me to believe that they're proprietary to one people. So it makes sense to me that, I guess in a way, that there would be some on different native land, but that also means that there's probably skinwalkers wherever there's technically native territory. That could be all the way up here in Washington State. It could be down in Louisiana or in the South. I'm not really too familiar on the tribes that live in that area, but I know there's reservations all around the country. So I guess it's more of a terrifying realization because that means they're kind of everywhere, just like other cryptids are. The other part that's also interesting too is you hear a lot of times in lore that you should never mention the name skinwalker, even though there's an actual native term for the term skinwalker, and it changes with every tribe, and so I don't really know it, but you can't mention that word, you can't mention skinwalker, you're not supposed to talk about it. And so I'm almost wondering, listening to the story, if them mentioning it and him playing Sounds of the Goat Man lured this thing in, and that's what attracted it. And then the third thing is that you have that putrid smell, that rotten meat smell that usually seems to appear with, I've heard it happen with Bigfoot encounters, I've heard it happen with flying humanoids and other sort of demonic sightings. And so, for it to happen with a skinwalker, it makes sense. I've heard it happen with skinwalkers and wendigos before too. And I can't think of the name of it at the moment off the top of my head, but there's another smell. Help me out here, guys. I honestly don't know. I'm having a brain fart at the moment. But it's sulfur. There we go. That's what I'm thinking of. Sulfur. So sulfur and rotting meat, even like Dogman, that you'll smell wet dog and rotting meat. There's always that underlying rotting death stink that seems to be common with cryptids, which is really interesting. And again, sometimes sulfur. So again, let's move on with the story. So we ended up running as fast as we could down the trail to try and lose it. When we turned around, it was still moving at the same pace, very slowly. Thinking that we were safe, we started to walk at a normal speed. We were also close to a road with a bunch of cars roaring past us. Me being curious, I looked behind us to see if the coast was clear, and to my horror, I saw that this thing had caught up to us. It was now at least 100 feet away, making no sound as it moved, and we were horrified to see that it had no face. So that's a little bit new. I can't really recall a skinwalker or even a wendigo encounter that I've come across in which the individual had no face or the cryptid had no face. I've read stories before about people encountering things with no faces, but not really anything that's supposed to be talked about as a skinwalker, but just maybe goes to show you that things can be changing, and it's very possible that there are skinwalkers without faces, or they can take that shape or form when they encounter people to terrify them. Again, I'm not really sure, but I like stories like this that kind of expand upon normal situations. It kind of just goes to show you that it's not just a boxed-in situation that you're going to find yourself in where these exact events and things are going to take place. Maybe sometimes this creature may take the form of a white humanoid. Maybe it may take the form of a coyote. Maybe it may take form of, in this case, some sort of faceless creature. My friends and I decided it was a good idea to bolt as fast as we could back to my car. When we got back to the parking lot, I saw that the only real car that was left was my car. And whatever that thing was that was following us was horrifyingly real. Fast forward a day later, I was walking my dogs around my house, and I saw a cat come out of the woods and start walking towards me. Me knowing that skinwalkers can take any form, I went back inside, not taking any chances. A few hours later, I picked up my friend Ted, and we originally were going to go back to my house and play video games. But as soon as we got to my house, he said he felt dread, so we ended up just driving around a bunch. Today, he ended up telling me that whatever he saw at the park, he saw at my house, giving the same description as what we saw at the park. He said it was tall, skinny, and had no face, describing the same thing that we saw at the park. So, skinwalker or creature that stalked my friends and I for a few days. Let's never meet again. Okay, so interesting last detail of that story. His friend told him that this thing basically followed him home, which, again, guys, seems to be another common occurrence with skinwalkers. You attract them, they follow you back to wherever it is you're going, whether that be home or whether that hopefully not be out of state. But I don't know if it's that they cling on to your energy or that their energy is just drawn to you because you summon them or what. But it seems that if you see them, same with Dogman and other cryptids, it's like when you see them, they like put something on you, like some sort of mark that, you've seen them, that they exist, and that they know that they exist. And for whatever reason, and I've heard this talked about a lot, it's a strange phenomenon. It's like now you're more inclined to see them or see cryptids or beings like them. It's like seeing them for the first time opens up that realm of exposure for you, and now it's going to start occurring. I don't really know how to describe it, but I've heard it talked about a lot, even on the kind of Dogman Encounter show. It's like it opens some sort of door once you find that these things exist, on a face-to-face basis. Especially those individuals, like with Dogman specifically, like they go their whole lives without seeing one, and they see one, whether it be a horrifying encounter or not. It's like it puts a mark on them, and then next thing you know, they're having other encounters with maybe not even just Dogman, but with other beings. So it's definitely strange. I'm not really sure if they're considered demonic or not, but they're definitely harvesters of dark energy, so to speak. And to sum story 2 up, I would definitely say it sounds true. They got all the details on skinwalkers pretty accurate and spot on, and it sounds like a quite terrifying experience, especially if this did happen in New Jersey like he says he did, just because that means they're out more than we could have ever imagined, and they're following us, and it really just teaches us to not draw them to you. That, maybe the natives had it right this whole time. Don't draw them in, don't talk about them, just avoid them as much as possible, and hopefully, just hopefully, you'll be safe. All right, on to story 3. I've always been into the paranormal, as most of us that visited this thread are. In January of 2019, I noticed something lumbering down my driveway. The window I was looking out faces over and above the drive, if that's clear. For example, I could see the roof of your car, but not always the bottom of the tire. Regardless, I noticed the movement. I look out and see what I initially thought was a bear, nose to the ground, kind of snuffling its head side to side, casually walking down the drive on all fours. A little geographical clarity. I live in town. The front of my neighborhood faces a major highway, but the back is all state game lands. I've seen some wildlife, turkeys, a deer here and there, and every skunk in the county apparently lives on my street. I don't see many squirrels, groundhogs, or chipmunks, which is a bit odd. I'm not very far from the city of Scranton, so Office fans can enjoy. About 7 miles from downtown, so I'm not exactly in the sticks. I watch this bear mosey down toward the street, its head lowered. I moved from the living room window to my bedroom window that has a full view of the street. Sure enough, here it comes. But something is wrong. I watch this not bear stand on 2 legs and casually walk out onto the road. I see pointed ears and a long snout. It's got its head raised, smelling the air. I felt pee run down my legs. This was no bear. I saw it in perfect silhouette under the yellow streetlight. It was either dark gray or black. The yellow light threw off the true color. It stood without effort, looked like one fluid movement. It then walked across the road, casual as you please, and kind of hunkered down in some scrub brush. I'm not sure what kind of brush, but it's like forsythia, all tangled and thick. Then I realized it was looking right into my bedroom. It had blue eyes, and I'm not sure if that was reflected light or that they were glowing, but it looked right at me. I lost my legs at that moment and sat down under my window. Absolutely panicked. I was home alone, with 5 cats and a dog who slept through everything. I didn't know what to do. My window is a big picture window, and if it wanted me, it could have easily gotten me. I cautiously got on my knees to peek over the sill, and I lost it. Didn't see eyes or it anywhere. It seemed to be either moving away from the forest, behind my house, or it decided to rest up in that scrub brush. What I saw under the streetlight is as follows. Darkish fur, high pointed ears, long muzzle. I never saw teeth or if it had a tail. It had hands with long claws that hung kind of limp wrist. If they were fully extended, they would have hung below the knee. It walked weird on dog legs. It looked heavily muscled, but had a tapered waist. It was about 7 to 7.5 feet tall, judging from where it stood in relation to the streetlight. It didn't seem aggressive, even when I felt it look right at me. I was terrified, but I didn't get a sense that it was pissed off it had been seen, as some people report. I didn't take a picture because I simply didn't think to. I was in a fair amount of shock, and I'm sure I'll eat shit for this, but sometimes your phone is the absolute last thing on your mind. The next day, I called Vic Hundiff of Dogman Encounters Radio. His advice was solid, and I try and remember it when I have to go out at night. There have been odd sounds, tapping at my window. I can hear scratching of the siding. I don't see that many animals around the neighborhood. There used to be about 7 stray cats that I fed. All gone now. Once the weather broke, it's been quiet. I installed motion lights and bought 2 game cameras. I'm hoping they are in a sense like Sasquatch. They avoid game cameras. I don't ever want to see this thing again. Those of you who want to see one, pray that you never do. My encounter was non-aggressive. I can't imagine having to deal with this thing pissed off. I still can't sleep a full night, and every sound scares the hell out of me after dark. I live alone, and the .357 Magnum I own would probably just ruffle its fur. Thank you for taking the time to read this. It was a terrifying animal to see. I hope I never see it again, but sadly, that wasn't in the cards. But I'll tell you about that story another time. Okay, guys, so we end story 3, and it's definitely an interesting story for sure. I'm definitely going to say it's true, just based on the details in which we'll jump into in just a second. just based on the description, how he saw it, the manner in which he saw it, where he lives, and the manner in which he gave this story to us, I would say it all depicts as true and feels pretty spot on. So now let's talk about the actual encounter. I didn't find a lot of spots in this story to necessarily stop and comment on a specific detail. Since it's kind of shorter, I figured I would just wait till the story is done and just do it all in one lump sum. Now, the first thing I want to touch upon is the silhouette underneath the streetlight. The way he describes it, the long muzzle, the pointed ears, having a bigger body, tapered waist, yada, yada, yada. It actually really reminds me of the depiction of a Dogman for Vic Hundiff's, I don't know if you want to call it his thumbnail, but his imagery. Like, so if you go to his YouTube channel and you look at his thumbnails, that same Dogman that's like in all of his thumbnails, and I think if you go to his website, it's there too. It's like that blackish, grapish looking, black kind of smoky colored creature, I guess you could say, wolf creature. That's basically what I'm talking about. I'm imagining like that in a silhouette underneath the streetlight, because that's kind of what he's accurately describing. And especially being in the area where he is, it's pretty in the boonies, you know, with a lot of forestry and acreage around, and especially with all the wildlife. And then he also mentioned the stray cats. And of course, just like in many Dogman encounter stories, stray animals always seem to go missing one by one, whether it's cats, dogs, chickens, goats, pigs, cows, you know, you name it, whether it's dead cattle or the pigs have gone missing. These things like to pick off animals and eat them, or God knows do what with them. And then he actually talks about talking to Vic himself. And so clearly Vic heard what he had to say. And, you know, that man's heard, I'm sure, a bazillion different Dogman encounters, far more than I ever have. And so if he's able to intake that story and believe it is true, especially enough to give his advice, which he is on the money with that. If that thing really wanted to get to him, it easily could have. So I definitely thought that was an interesting detail in the story, and it just gives it more validity. The one thing that I will say was a little new, and I've only heard this seldom, like out of 100 stories, one story will be this way, where they talk about the eye color. Now, he had mentioned blue eyes. I think I've only ever read like maybe one or two other encounters ever that talk about these things having like purple or blue eyes, or even green eyes. So maybe 3 or 4 stories in total. But most of the time it's either yellow, amber, or glowing red. Those are like the top 3 most common colors people see these things have eyes. And I don't know if it's the eye shine thing. I'm not sure if it's the eye glow thing going on. But those just seem to be the common colors that people see. So that's interesting to note. And a last detail that I also find interesting is a lot of people in these Dogman stories seem to, for whatever reason, carry the popular .357 Magnum. And I don't know if that's just the Dogman hunter's weapon of choice or what. You know, to be honest, I don't even think a .357 is going to do much to these things, because, you know, these are like 9 feet tall killing machines, you guys. And if they're really supernatural or demonic or not of this world, you know, if they're not flesh and blood, then I don't think these weapons are really going to do much. Now, the whole flesh and blood topic could be its own video in itself. There's so many videos and stories where these ex-Marine and ex-Army and all these people talk about shooting these things with .50 caliber ammunition and just all sorts of high-powered weaponry, and it not even doing a thing to these things. But I've also heard other encounters where they shoot this thing and there's blood. So, you know, to be honest, guys, I'm not too sure on that. That is a topic in which I would have to have somebody on a podcast debating that, talking about it. That is such a huge rabbit hole. But anyway, kind of losing base here. To touch back upon story 3, we're going to summarize and say that based on the details given, I will mark it as true, and we will move on to story 4. Hello. I promise this isn't an ARG or anything. I'll say that outright before anyone thinks otherwise. You honestly still might think I'm messing with you by the end of this, but I really promise I'm not. We are very scared, and I hope this can help us out. The reasons I believe this to be a skinwalker, or possibly a Wendigo, is due to several factors. 1. I literally live on a native burial ground. A lot of my town was built on a Raritan Native American burial ground. even though I know I cannot find any research on mythical beasts or anything like that. I'm aware that Wendigos are native to the northeastern United States. Burial mounds? Oh man, this guy is screwed from the get-go. Okay, I'm pretty sure all of you out there have listened enough to know, and you could probably agree with me, that this poor guy, he is screwed. Already, if you're living on an ancient Indian burial ground, I mean, that's just asking for things to come and visit you and be in your area. I wouldn't be surprised if this man had skinwalkers, Wendigo, Dogman, God knows what else. You know, who knows out of how many of those natives that died, what energy that's attracting, what kind of... I mean, it's really hard to tell what could even be around there. And he's talking about skinwalkers. In this specific case, with an ancient Indian burial ground, it could be much more than just skinwalkers, like I was saying. It would truly be hard to measure the unprecedented amount of dark energy that could just be in the area alone that would be drawing these things in, or maybe this energy manifesting as skinwalkers. I'm just guessing, guys. I really have no idea how it works, but I guess it would make sense in my mind if this is kind of how things went on, but let's listen more. Several of my close friends have had a very similar encounter with eerily similar circumstances that leads us to believe that there is something weird going on. Needless to say, if we're going crazy, we're all going crazy together. Now, before I start telling the subsequent stories, I would like to add that I have done a little research on this already, and I have heard that they may be able to contact you in your dreams. A little while ago, I had a nightmare where what I then believed may have been a Wendigo, but now believed to now possibly be a skinwalker, was behind me. I could feel an imposing, warm breath figure. I said to it, "I don't know what to do." It then responded with, "You'll know soon." I would like to add that this wasn't a lucid dream. I had no control over what I was saying. When it touched me, I jolted awake directly into a panic attack. I have had bad nightmares ever since I was a little kid, with very similar outcomes. But this one felt different. Now, I can't remember if it's skinwalkers or Wendigos, but I think I'm going to lean a little bit more on the Wendigo side of things for this, which is also interesting that he talks about Wendigos being a popular cryptid that's in the northeastern part of the United States, further validating what I said earlier when I had talked about the same kind of thing going on. But I digress. The Wendigo part that I'm talking about is that people have talked about seeing them in their dreams, or that they'll be in a dreamlike state where these things come to them, or that's how they manifest to these people, or that's how it manifests itself to these people, is through dreams. With skinwalkers, I'm not so sure how that works. Again, I kind of confuse the two, or specifics of these two a lot, because they kind of seem so similar that they're kind of based from the same origins, but they are different beings. So I'm hoping some of you guys who really know the true differences between a Wendigo and a skinwalker can kindly shed some light in the comments below and give us a real good nitty gritty of what really separates the two, because I would love to read that, to be honest. So yeah, let's move on. Originally, I believed that it may have been some sort of sign for my brain to apply myself more, but now I think it's connected to this. I really hope I don't sound stupid, but I am seriously freaking out over this. The first story happened to my friend, and so we'll call her Allison, just for the sake of privacy. Her family owns 5 acres of property a few hours away from town. A few months ago, her and a few of her friends went there, and something started running and slamming itself against the side of the house. Snow was falling from the roof onto the ground before the slamming. They looked through the window and saw a large figure run back into the woods. None of her family was up there to witness it, but there were 2 people who saw it happen other than Allison. As I'm writing this, I just remembered another dream I had, where it felt like I just woke up from a sleeping. I walked upstairs since my room is in a basement, and when I opened the door, I thought it bumped my dog with the door. Her food and water bowl is right next to the door, so I'm used to it. As I turned to look at the front door, my dog was standing in front of it. Realizing that what I bumped wasn't my dog, I turned to discover a bipedal beast hidden in the shadows of my room, storming at me. I then woke up. So again, guys, I know people could just, write this off as a bad dream, and it very well may be, but, it's interesting that we're talking about Wendigos and appearing in dreams, and he's talking about skinwalkers and Wendigos and seeing similar creatures and how these things manifest itself. This might have been a Wendigo, you guys. Again, the story so far seems like it's on the path of being true and valid, but I don't know if it's actually a skinwalker. Because, again, I believe Wendigos are more into the whole appearing in your dreams and showing themselves that way, and it kind of seems like that's it. Soon after the encounter with Allison, my friend Eric was sitting on top of a jungle gym in town at night. I believe he was with 7 other people. I can't fact check it right now because Eric and I aren't talking for reasons I'll explain later on the timeline. At least him and one other person saw a 9-foot figure with glowing eyes and antlers in the woods surrounding the park. He knew about Wendigos because of the obsession I grew after my first dream, and ran as fast as he could. I thought he was messing with me, and I told him that Wendigos don't actually have antlers, but he stood by what he saw. I now believe this to have been a skinwalker messing with him, making him believe he saw a Wendigo. Okay, now this is a really interesting part of the story too. He talks about seeing a 9-foot-tall, dark humanoid figure with antlers and glowing red eyes, right? So, again, this is where my lack of knowledge of skinwalkers and Wendigo really shines through. He obviously saw one or the other. I can definitively say that based on his descriptions alone. But I can't, for the life of me, remember which has antlers and which doesn't. I know I've seen comments before in my videos where people telling me, hey, Wendigos have antlers, Wendigos don't have antlers. I can't remember, to be honest. The other thing is, do cryptids coincide and work together like that, where a skinwalker knows and is aware of the existence of these other beings, Wendigos, and will go out of their way to trick a person to make them believe that they themselves are a Wendigo when they're actually a skinwalker? And if that is the case, why? What would be the purpose of that? So that part, again, sounds valid, sounds true, but why? I'm kind of more inquisitive than I am to give actual informative commentary on that part, because it's new to me, and this whole topic of just skinwalkers and Wendigos are always so enlightening when I get to read these stories, because it's not really something that I know as much of as I would Dogman and Bigfoot. Things died down for a few months, and this time I completed that thing I had to apply myself for, and heavily advertised it around the whole Wendigo motive. Ever since then, the air felt heavy, and I felt like I was being stalked from the woods. But it could have also been me spooking myself into thinking that. But still. One time Allison was picking up Eric and I from the house. When I got in the car, she was clearly rattled. She told me that she saw a large bipedal deer standing in the middle of the road next to the tree line off a side road on my way to the house. Now, I'm pretty sure the whole deer thing, again, that's also, I believe, skinwalker. Because if I remember right, I think when they're up north or more in the woods and stuff like that, they'll kind of take more of the rotting deer with antlers. Or maybe I'm thinking of Wendigo. I'm going to go ahead and go with skinwalker, because I think the skinwalkers down in like the Navajo area, like Arizona, Utah, all that, they kind of take on more the shape of the coyote. So I could be wrong, but that's what I'm going to go with based on what I can remember. And so far, the story's still, everything's kind of gluing together. It's still good details. There's a reason I share these specific kinds of encounters with you guys, because I know you'll enjoy them, and they're not blatant creepypasta like some of the stories that I've put out before. So let's listen more and see what else happens. Just a quarter mile from the playground Eric had his encounter a few months prior. I'm aware that actual people don't say large bipedal deer, but her dad's a hunter, and it probably has something to do with that. We had to pass the road again, and when we got there were 2 police cars examining the area with flashlights. As she was about to drop us off later that night, we passed yet another time, where we saw that one of the police cars was still there, parked on the street with all lights off. Allison and Eric were pretty shaken up, and I tried my best to assure them that whatever we were dealing with, it couldn't have actually been a Wendigo. I wasn't entirely sure about that, but I'm aware that no Native American depictions of them had antlers. Okay, so 3 things I want to end the story on. First, being a little ways back, like a couple minutes back, he talked about there, kind of a weird feeling in the air. Not like a weird presence feeling, like a feeling of dread, but a feeling in the air itself. The air felt heavy. The other feeling that people describe it as is staticky. You'll hear that in a lot of encounters, that the air feels staticky, electricity. And the closest way I can describe that for people who aren't able to put that together is thunderstorm. If you've ever been around where there's a heavy thunderstorm, the air changes. Like, you could feel it as it's coming in. The air feels, I don't want to say thicker, but it's definitely got more of a staticky. There's more of an electric feel in the air. It's really hard for me to explain, but for those of you who've been out in thunderstorms, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's weird that same feeling in the air. It's almost as if an electromagnetic force is in the area or in the air. And I'm not sure why a lot of these cryptids cause that to happen, but it's interesting. The other thing, so number 2, is the police. So I almost wonder if other people saw this thing in the area. Maybe it ran out in front of someone's car, who knows? But the police were obviously alerted, and they were looking for something. Now, it could just be a coincidence in the story that there happened to be something that they were looking for, maybe like a person or something. But generally, you'd only send out 1 police officer for just something inquisitive. So maybe it was something serious that they knew about, hence there being multiple cop cars and 2 police officers shining their lights in the area that they had just saw this thing. So it's kind of, something's going on. That's all I got to say. And it sounds pretty interesting to me. It kind of makes the story a lot more eerie. Now, when they're on their way back and the car lights and stuff were off, I don't really know anything about that or what that really equals out to. But maybe they were called and they knew exactly what they were dealing with. Hence, they sent the police over there to check it out. And yeah, I'm not too sure on that. But this story, again, to me, definitely kind of fits the bill with all the other ones that are accurate and valid. He hit on all the points. I mean, descriptions are spot on. Again, this is a really good story for those like me who are not super educated on, specifics of Wendigos and Skinwalkers, but know that they exist and that they have certain quality, each have individual qualities that make them what they are. So it makes a really good listening experience to learn a bit about both of those cryptids. So let's go on to story 5. Some of you may know me from my post here, where I give as much info in Skinwalkers as I can. A while ago, I asked my mother about Skinwalkers. Now, my mother is a good source, but she also gave up some traditional beliefs to be a Christian, so she doesn't believe in Navajo things as much as others do. My father, on the other hand, is far more traditional, in addition to being a Navajo policeman and investigator, so he's seen some things. He didn't say much about the subject, but that I haven't already said, but he did affirm some things. Skinwalkers are not trying to kill you. They are trying to make you suffer. The wolf is the preferred form since coyotes are too small and not right for the magic. Motives for Skinwalkers usually amount to jealousy or envy. For example, someone has a shiny brand new truck and the Skinwalker is jealous of that person, or when someone is doing very well in life. Yi Nadloshi does not literally translate to, by way of it he goes on all fours. This might be a personal thing since my dad has always maintained that there are no direct translations of Navajo words. He explained by saying it describes how an animal with 4 legs walks. Watch a dog, a cat, deer, or any 4-legged animal. That is what Nadlush describes. But there are many ways to say walk. He kind of went on a spewel. He told me stories of how at least once a month he would get a call to investigate Skinwalker sightings. One time, the person said they shot the Skinwalker, and when daylight came, they followed the trail to a dead man caught in a barbed wire fence. He also had a story about seeing an alien craft, but it was just the morning star, and he was a little delirious from being awake for 3 days. This was when he was first starting out as an officer. He also told me that in Navajo words, they have power, so you must be careful with what you say. For example, do not lament having to care for your livestock as they may disappear, which is where the don't talk about skinwalker thing comes from, when really it's about all bad things, like death, poverty, hunger, or even misfortune. Okay, so this one, a little bit of a shorter story, but I would believe it all the way. It's someone retelling a little bit about their father and how they were an officer on the res, and a little backstory on that. And literally everything's, again, spot on. If you look at any of the lore, any of the information on skinwalkers in relation to Navajo reservation life, all that, I mean, it fits right in. So this is a really great little story that kind of gives more backstory onto the how and why of skinwalkers in that area. One interesting detail he talked about was that I guess skinwalkers prefer the wolf form more than a coyote form, even though, as you guys have heard on my channel, there's been quite a few stories that these things will kind of show themselves as in a coyote form. But the wolf thing, I guess that would make more sense for the encounters that we've all heard where people actually see, what they describe as a werewolf looking thing out in the middle of nowhere at night, in Arizona or Utah or New Mexico or wherever, and because there are those kind of sightings. But, again, we go back to the whole speaking and words that, you're not allowed to talk about it. And you shouldn't say it because these Navajo people, they believe that when they speak these things, that it has power. And the power is to draw these things in, to attract them to you, to bring them in. And so it is forbidden and really taboo to talk about it, to mention it. So it makes sense. So it's just more validation, and it just concretes more what we know already about skinwalkers and Navajo. And this is kind of how you end up gaining a bunch of knowledge on these things, is when you listen to these stories like this, where it's not just someone's direct encounter, but it's more of somebody's experiences in the area, experiences with that lifestyle, experiences, growing up and seeing these things. In this case, his dad being a police officer and being around that type of environment and having these experiences around these types of creature. Because anybody could just have an encounter and say that they saw this thing, but, to have the knowledge of, depicting what form it prefers, or, when that person shot it, or supposedly shot something that found a dead man kind of in a fence. It's just interesting insight into the whole, or that specific cryptid. And these kind of stories I really like, and I really enjoy sharing them. On to the last story, you guys. There I was, a little 5-year-old, just out on the back porch with my dad listening to the foxes. I find their noises interesting and listen closely. Then I see it. Just standing there, a thing, an animal. I didn't know at the time. I saw its eyes, a glowing red full of fury and rage, and I immediately got bad vibes. So what did I do? Stupid 5-year-old me decided to stare it down, 'cause I'm tough. Then it darted. I looked around for it and tried to find answers, but none came. I told my dad what I saw, and I said I was scared. He shrugged it off as just my childlike imagination. Ever since that night, I've seen it. The head of a deer, the body of a wolf, and the deep Nor black wolf just the other night that came in my dream. I was laying down in my bed and fell asleep, and I woke up in my bed. Then I heard it. Slam. It bashed its head against my window, and at this point I had had enough. I grabbed a shotgun and shot. Its head fell on the floor, gushing with blood, but when I looked up, its head was still on its body, but its hand was gone. It used its hand as a decoy. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my legs like needles. I looked down. My legs and hands had been ripped to shreds by the other hand. I immediately fell down. Then it bit. It bit again and again. It bit into my stomach. I looked up and watched it eating my intestines, and that's when my dream ended. I woke up at around 2 a.m. in a cold sweat. I didn't know what to do, so it stopped hunting me for now, but I don't know if it'll come back. I don't know if I want it to either. Also, another really interesting story for the last one in the video. So he had this encounter, when he was a little kid, that he saw this like really black-looking wolf outside. But then the next part where he talks about the vivid dream he had, this is kind of where things get interesting. So normally people could say that, okay, there's quite a few ways you could look at this. The first way is you could look at this as him seeing, actually seeing what he saw. And then the dream he had is just, he's just a 5-year-old, he had a bad dream. But I tend to go with the other way of looking at it, where he did see what he actually saw, but that the dream he had could have actually been put on him by this Dogman or this evil creature. Let's think about it for a second. Like, listen to the dream that he described it as. He's talking about this thing breaking through the window, devouring him, eating his stomach. You tell me what 5-year-old is going to have that vivid of an imagination to know about those things, to even have that concept of this big beast breaking through a window, eating your legs and ripping out your intestines and eating that. That's morbidly vivid. And I'm sorry, but unless your 5-year-old is exposed to really inappropriate, gory movies, I don't see that being plausible in any way. It's just more the vividness. Or, option 3 would be that he's just full of shit and that this whole story is fake, which very well could be. So again, I could lead on the fence on this one, but it's kind of the way he described it. I would go ahead and give him the benefit of a doubt, because his tone of voice, I should say the tone of the writing, kind of, in my opinion, leans more toward him actually recounting this happening and what he felt. And if this did happen to him, obviously it must have traumatized him, because how vivid he remembers the details and things. And so I'll go ahead and give him the benefit of a doubt of it being on the true side. And I think the thing that seals the deal for me, that has me fall on the true side, is it's that dream, that vivid, morbid dream, because this wouldn't be the first time that people have seen cryptids or these horrible beings, and, they have these horrible, lucid, vivid dreams of not just like seeing this creature not being able to run away, but these things getting them. It's very demonic in nature. And again, we kind of go back to that, what we talked earlier about these things putting that mark on you, and maybe that's its mark that it's putting on this kid. And there's so many different ways you can discuss this and go about it. Again, guys, it's just another rabbit hole you can go down that could literally take hours and hours of a podcast and debating with somebody. But, we'll keep it short. And again, I'll lean on the true side of things and say that this dream was caused by this creature and that he did indeed see a Dogman. So that will sum up episode 6 today, guys, of Encounters Debunked, Truth or Myth, Dogman and Skinwalker Encounters. I hope you guys have enjoyed it this far, and I can't wait to see you all in episode 7. As far as the next episode, I'm not exactly sure what I'll be covering. I think every week it'll just be a mystery, and I'm not really sure if I said that in the last episode or not, but yeah, well, I'll try and keep it new and refreshing for you guys. If you enjoy my content, be sure to leave a comment, like, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you'd like to see more of my scary True Encounter videos, I usually leave a bunch in the description. If you're into a lot of creature encounters, there's a bunch of really cool ones I've listed from Amazon in my description as well. And again, guys, I will see you in the next episode coming next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Enjoy.